Good morning and welcome to Veronica Live, and we are here with our first guest. We are kicking off with Jason Morgan. He is the co-author of The Comfort Hoax, a fake memoir, North Korean Spies and Hit Squads in the Academic Swamp. Welcome, Jason, to Veronica Live.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
And we were just talking offline, and you literally just got off the plane and landed from Japan. So tell us where you live in Japan.
I live in Kashiwa. It's in Chiba Prefecture. It's about a little less than an hour northeast of downtown Tokyo. Teach at a little university there.
Wow.
And, just got off the plane last night from Haneda.
Okay. And do you actually teach in Japanese or in English? And what do you teach over there?
It's about half and half.
Okay.
It just depends on the level of the students. I teach whatever they ask me. Sorry, the computer's acting up in the background. I teach whatever they ask me to teach. I do mainly Japanese studies, Japanese history, Japanese culture, and some philosophy classes, and some history classes, just a mix of things. It's a small university, so we have basically general intro courses.
Okay, and tell us what your background is and how you actually ended up in Japan.
Well, I come from some small towns in the South, was born in Louisiana, grew up there and in Tennessee, and just by chance or luck or fate, some exchange students from Japan came to my little university in Tennessee about 25 years ago, and I ended up becoming friends with one of them in the soccer club. We were just kicking the soccer ball around together. And when he went back to Japan, I had become interested in Japan, and so I asked if I could go back there and visit, and I did, and it was just from there, I just decided I was never going to go back to the United States after that. So
well, and I was telling... Go ahead.
No, that's it. I ended up, my life became about studying Japan, living in Japan. I've been very blessed.
And how was it learning the language? Because I took just a couple years of Japanese, and I was the worst student ever. And I actually have a foreign language degree in Romance languages, but I couldn't get Japanese to stick. So how was that? Because you're actually, teaching in Japan in Japanese.
Boy, I'll tell you, when I'm finished learning it, I'll let you know. It's always, every day is a new mistake and a new set of vocabulary to learn. And it's been 25 years. It never ends.
Well, it's funny because I did look up how to say Veronica Live yokoso. So that means welcome to Veronica Live. But we're here to talk about your riveting book. And, I wanted to hear the story from you because John and we talk a lot about people being canceled. And this actually involves Harvard. And you wrote this book about the comfort women, right. I guess, AKA prostitutes and their story. So start there because having lived over in Japan myself, I know there's always tension between the Japanese and the Koreans, and then the Japanese and the Chinese, and then John does a lot of work in Korea, so he understands, the Korean side a little bit himself. So tell us the story of prostitution, because that always is riveting, and the era that we're talking about.
Right. Okay. Well, to jump in very briefly, to jump into the history, in the 1910s, 1920s, Japan was arguably the most progressive country in the world when it came to prostitution. There was a global movement that very much involved the United Kingdom, the United States, in allowing women to register as prostitutes. And this is the reason that this is so progressive for the time is because until that point, women who worked as prostitutes in London or New York or whatever, they were completely at the mercy of the worst elements of society, the pimps and gangsters and hustlers. And so allowing women to register meant that they could be visible in the eyes of the state, and that would allow them to access social services. And the hope was eventually they would be able to leave prostitution. That was the part of the sort of social engineering side or the socially progressive side. And Japan was at the forefront of this. So in the 1910s or 1920s, they were developing this registered prostitution system. And the idea was to get women to be able to have a foothold in society so they could leave this profession. In the 1930s, war broke out in Asia, and Japan, the Japanese army, was moving into China. Well, common with armies everywhere, the men were visiting prostitutes. There were two big problems with it. The first problem was that the men were catching venereal disease, and as had been learned in the Siberian expedition in World War I, when men catch venereal disease, they can't fight, and it affects the unit's ability to fight the war. The second problem is that the Chinese side was sending spies to work in the brothels. So the men were visiting the brothels, getting drunk, giving away, troop location information and plans, battle plans, and so forth. So the Japanese government, the military, decided to extend the licensed prostitution system to Asia. And they recruited women from Japan, mainly from Japan and the Korean Peninsula. And these women went to these brothels that were next to army bases in Asia. And they worked there as military prostitutes. Well, that's the basic history. In the early 1980s, a Japanese communist, ex-con, wrote a memoir in which he said that he went to Jeju Island off the coast of South Korea and rounded up Korean women at bayonet for these brothels. Well, some Japanese historians checked this out and decided it wasn't true. The South Koreans were very angry about this. How dare you insinuate that we just sat by idly while you rounded up our women? It was an insult to the Koreans. Well, this story took off, as we now know, because the North Koreans were pushing it. This became a very good way for the North Koreans to try to break up the relationship among South Korea, Japan, and the United States. So this story took off in the 1990s. It has nothing to do with history. This is a North Korean spy operation. And when some South Korean scholars started to point this out, they were canceled because there's a nationalist element to this. South Korea and Japan have this history of colonization. So that's one layer of it. But the meat of it is that this is a North Korean operation to try to get the United States and Japan and South Korea to stop cooperating in East Asia. That's the nutshell version of all this comfort women business.
Well, and talk about now, you've told us the history of these comfort women and, reading the book, some were in it to definitely make some money. But fast forward to how you bring this narrative to light and now people want to cancel you.
Yes. So my co-author wrote Mark Ramsar. He's a professor at Harvard Law. He's become a very good friend. He was born in the United States, but he grew up in Japan, in Miyazaki, down south. I think you were in Okinawa?
Yes.
So he was much farther south than I was, probably closer to where you were. And he went to school there and speaks Japanese perfectly like a Japanese person. So he has been studying legal history of Japan his entire career, and he came to the same conclusion that I did, reading these documents. The standard history in Japan is that as I just said, that this was part of the licensed prostitution system, and the idea that there was a sort of a mass abduction of women has no basis in historical fact. And he wrote a very short paper, 8 pages, for a rather out-of-the-way journal about 4 years ago, in which he said that this was the contract system under which these women worked. Well, things blew up. This 8-page paper was introduced in Japan, and from there it got introduced in South Korea, and the South Korean left. They went completely wild. And the professors in the United States, they smelled blood in the water because this has become a feminist issue in the United States.
Great.
And suddenly, we don't make any normative claims in the book, and I don't want to speak for Mark Ramsar, but I think, we're not we're not pro-prostitution. We're not pro brothels next to military bases. We have our own very strong moral ideas about this, and we don't think this is a good thing in any way. This is not something that we're trying to defend. We're just simply saying this is the way it was. And boy, people were signing petitions. 30,000 people signed a petition to try to get him fired, to try to get his paper retracted. He was getting death threats. The South Korean news crews were stalking him outside of his home. I mean, it just went completely nuts. And, it's people in South Korea are put in prison for this. People are facing jail time. We were just speaking with a professor yesterday who was just acquitted in a criminal trial for saying that these women were prostitutes. It's all sorts of layers to this, but the cancellation in the American Academy was just out of control. I mean, what I discovered is that these American academics, these woke academics, they don't have any. They're not intellectuals at all. They don't know how to deal with ideas and to have a debate. Whenever something comes along they don't like, they have a panic attack and they just try to get people thrown out of the academy. I was expecting a debate, but these people just had a conniption fit.
Yeah, you could write a whole book on that.
Well, I wanted to read, Jason. You had there in the book. You talk about this all the hate mail and this internet stalker that I think she was a professor and she literally lost it. So let me read this little snippet. She wrote, "Will your mother in heaven or daughter in Somerville be pleased with your article? And in the future, will our Lord Jesus, who is in charge of our lives, be pleased with what's going on right now?" And she gets more into it. "Take heart and have courage to step out of this worldly mess. Declare who you are in Christ and just walk away on the path the Holy Spirit wants you to be on." I mean, this woman was psycho. Oh my gosh. Yeah,
this lady, I'm sorry to use a technical term, but this lady, she's bug nuts. And, the thing is that the whole time she was, this is a letter that she wrote to Mark Ramsar, and the whole time she was writing this, she was contacting publishers of his books and his articles and basically threatening them that if they don't take his articles down or stop publishing his books, then she's going to wage a campaign against him. The whole time she was, telling him that your mother in heaven, which is just creepy.
Oh my gosh, yes.
In people's family and, the deceased relatives, it's just beyond the pale. And the whole time she was doing this, she was waging a harassment campaign against his publisher.
Her own jihad.
Completely nuts. Boy, she's a piece of work. But this is typical of the American Academy. We were expecting a debate. This is a contentious topic. We were ready to have the debate, but we were not ready for the bug nuts, lady. I have to tell you.
Jason, I wanted to ask you. I've spent some time in Korea, traveling back and forth. Still do. And I've been to the Korean War Museum, and one of the things that I won't say impressed because war's never impressive, but they go back. History in that museum goes back to the 1100s, I think, some of the documents and the stuff they have. But, Korea's traditionally been an occupied country. The Chinese, the Japanese, whatever, cycles go back and forth. And I'm trying to understand, it is a great book. I was trying to understand the psychology because there is a visceral hate is probably a little strong, but hate between the Japanese and the Koreans, and every time
it is true, John. That is true.
I recently made it. I do stuff for the military, for the Korean military over there, and I made a suggestion to one of their acquisition agencies is that they cooperate with the Japanese on a shipbuilding program. And I mean,
you started World War III.
So, it is this hoax? Did the hatred start first, or did the hoax take advantage of the psychology?
This is a really excellent question. One of the things that I've discovered, I lived in South Korea too. I lived in Gyeongsang-buk-do for a year. It was a beautiful place. I had a wonderful time there in South Korea. and I have some very, very good Korean friends. Some of the professors that we worked with are South Koreans. One of the big issues, there was a book that came out a few years ago by Lee Yong-hun, who's a professor at Nakseongdae Economic Studies Institute. He used to be at Seoul National University, economics researcher. And he and his co-authors were arguing against this sort of visceral nationalism on which the South Korean or the Korean sort of mentality, they're arguing against the anti-Japanese nationalism. They're arguing for a more positive nationalism for Korea. So you're right that Korea has traditionally been an occupied country. They were very close to the Chinese. The Chinese were basically using them as a vassal state, and then when they were under the control of Japan in the 20th century. So a lot of this history gets taken up into the comfort women issue. The scholars who argue for a more nuanced view of the comfort women, they tend to be those who also argue for a more nuanced view of Japan's relationship with Korea. So, for example, not on the prostitution issue, but on the issue of economic development. Some of the professors who are arguing, as we do, on the comfort women issue, they will say, Japan occupied Korea, it's true, but Japan also brought a new level of modernization to the Korean economy, which I think is also true. But when you say something like this, then the Korean left will push back and say that you're arguing in favor of colonialism and imperialism and so forth. The issue with Japan is very much caught up in the comfort women issue, and I think the North Koreans have exploited this quite deliberately, that they know that anything that has to do with Japan will elicit this almost visceral response. And I think that's what they were counting on. But what's happened with the comfort women issue is that there's been quite a change. We were quite surprised to find that Mark Ramseyer's books, some of his publications, his papers, were published in Korea just late last year, early this year, in Korean. And, we thought there would be protests and the book would be burned and so forth. But it actually seemed to do fairly well in South Korea. There were no major protests. I think people with this comfort women issue, they've seen that they've been manipulated by North Korea. There's been a little bit of a sea change. But you're right, there's the visceral sort of nationalist background to all this.
So my question to you is, were you political before you were canceled, and how did you deal with that? And Mark as well, because when people, that's the thing, when the left is mad at you, they want to get you fired, they want you to have to hire lawyers and lose all your money, right. And they want to take you out. Right. And you guys were right. Academic kind of people, thought you were on their team, and I like that you were trying to tell the real story, and then you're canceled for it.
There's a little bit of a background to this too. Mark is, Harvard Law, and he's apolitical. I don't see any. He's a Chicago School economics professor, so he's interested in rational markets and rational choice. And some people would say that's political, but I think he's basically just economics logic, microeconomics scholar. I don't think there's any political valence to it. So he was never openly political in his career, not that I know of. I think he's been very, very, right down the center in a scholarly fashion. But when I was in graduate school, I showed up to the University of Wisconsin in 2011, and when I got there, I found that people in the history department, I was in the history department, they were calling Scott Walker, who was the governor at the time, Nero. And, apparently Scott Walker was Hitler. And Scott Walker was just trying to lower taxes for Wisconsin citizens, which I thought was a pretty good idea. So I thought I was there to debate. And so I came out in favor of Scott Walker on the email list. And boy, suddenly I was...
How dare you?
And when I was at the University of Wisconsin, I was taking positions that nobody else took, but it wasn't like I was the only one. For example, I'm pro-life. I'm in favor of lower taxes. I'm I'm a pretty hardcore libertarian, so I think the government should be small and stay out of our business, and so forth and so forth. And I was just trying to have a debate, and people were incapable of having a debate. All they could do was call me a fascist or a racist or a white supremacist. Mark Ramsar, when he wrote this book, people were literally calling him a Holocaust denier, a white supremacist, a fascist. He's been called a misogynist.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was quite shocking to him, I think. To me, I'd heard it all before because I'd been in these debates with, not even debates, but I'd been on the receiving end of this really unhinged hate. This cancellation thing is because the left has no arguments. They don't know how to debate. They don't have the ability to use their minds to think rationally. I've seen it 100,000 times in my seminars, in academic settings. The left, they don't have any ideas. All they can do is they can scream and shout and shriek and try to get people fired or try to get their houses burned down or send Antifa to pay them a visit. When people get canceled, they're met with this wall of anti-intellectualism. They don't know how to respond. That's the whole thing about cancellation, is to try to numb you, to try to make you panic. But Mark Ramsar, he didn't. It was fantastic. He didn't. He held his ground, and he said, look, let's have a debate, but I'm not going to back down. And I think they didn't know what to do. They ran away.
Yeah,
they called him a Holocaust fire, and they ran away.
The last thing they want typically is a debate because they don't have the facts or they can't refute there's their truth and your truth,
Right.
They don't understand objective versus subjective truth, which you can go back philosophy and start at ground zero with these idiots. I'm just curious, just as an aside, in Japan, do they care about pronouns and microaggressions?
No, they don't care about, it's wonderful to be in Japan. I've been teaching there for 7 or 8 years now, and not once, nobody has ever come to my office to bring me a Molotov cocktail. No one's ever tried to get me fired. The thing is that they're adults. I know there are people at my university who disagree with me. I disagree with them on a variety of things, but that's just human life. That people have different opinions, and if you're an adult, you just say, well, that's your opinion. Have a nice life. We don't need to fight over what we think about history or capitalism or whatever. Just you go your way, I'll go my way, and we'll just live and let live. I think that the Japanese way on that is beautiful. We don't have these idiot wars on campus about pronouns or about microaggressions. It's very, very simple. Come to Japan, please. If you don't like being canceled, please come teach at my little university and have a happy life.
Well, what I loved when I lived there, Jason, I went to Tokyo around Christmas time, and they were playing Christmas music in every store, Christmas trees everywhere. And then I was there for Easter one year too, and Easter bunnies, it was not this cancel all the holiday stuff. And, they're 99% like Buddhist or, so it was just really funny to me that we go so overboard in America.
People in Japan tell me Merry Christmas every year. They say Merry Christmas. I say Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas.
Doesn't hurt anything. Jason, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about on this was this, my impression of Korea, or South Korea, not North Korea, obviously, it's kind of like the U.S. was in the 1950s from a societal standpoint, except you bring in all the modern technology. But, it's like, the streets are clean. You see little kids walking around by themselves, and it's like stuff you'd never see. And I've asked, does anybody worry about these little kids? Like 4 and 5 year olds.
Yes, that was always shocking to me.
In big cities. Right, and they're like, nobody would ever fool with the kids and try and kidnap them or anything else. That's just not acceptable on any, and adults will intervene. Stuff that used to be in the U.S. So, taking that mindset, that was kind of what I was trying to draw into your book was we have the modern mindset of the U.S. So you're trying to read, context wise. I'm reading the book, and it's like I'm trying to marry that image of Korea up with the U.S. image and prostitution and human rights and all this outrage about this. How do you? I don't know if Japan is. I've been to Japan 3 or 4 times, but I don't understand the culture as well. But it's very monolithic. So and it's not monolithic here. So how much of this is a culture clash
between South Korea and Japan? You mean?
Well, more U.S. I'm talking about the academic response to this book. Yeah, it seems to be more of a U.S. versus maybe saying Japan, South Korea axis is, academic axis is too strong, but just is this a U.S. versus them problem, or is it just aimed at U.S. versus South Korea?
In some ways, it is. It's a great question. I would complicate a little bit the monolithic idea. Scholarship in Korea and Japan is extraordinarily diverse, and I think in society in many ways. People who have spent time in Japan have often come away with an impression that it's monolithic. If you talk to people just on a regular basis and really just meet them where they are, you'll find that there's a really extraordinarily diverse array of opinions and ideas. I think that in terms of cultural order, having children walk around the streets and having the streets be cleaned, this is in many ways this is a product of Japan in the early 20th century. When Japan went to Korea, went to Taiwan, they brought a vision of orderliness to those societies, which in itself was a product of Japan's rapid modernization in the late 19th century. So a lot of what we see in Korea and Japan today is a holdover from something that happened more than a century ago, keeping the streets clean and so forth. Us versus them, that's how many of the American scholars see it, I think, because they tend to look down. One thing that I really noticed in this debate, it's not even a debate, this comfort women thing, is how much the white liberal American scholars look down on people who are not white liberals. I mean, the racism is just off the charts for these people. I mean, you see, notice it with these inside the United States. The people who, all these DEI people, they're all. I'm sorry to say it, but they're all white liberals, and these people that are doing the DEI stuff, it's as though they just use these people who are not white liberals to make themselves feel better about their diversity charts or whatever. We've checked off all these boxes, but we're still in control of the mechanism. These people that we are arguing against, these white liberals in the American Academy, they don't read Japanese and Korean books. They don't talk to Japanese and Korean scholars. They act like everything in the world is decided in seminars at Columbia University. So there's that aspect of the American white liberals just looking down on Asian scholars. The other aspect, the one that we're trying to bring out, is that this is not about Japan versus South Korea. This is about North Korea versus Japan and South Korea. This is about North Korea manipulating this. So these South Korean scholars now, what they're trying to say is, look, South Korea is a legitimate country. North Korea is trying to say that South Korea is not a legitimate country because it's cooperating with Japan, and it's a puppet of the United States and so forth. But what South Korea and the Japanese side are saying is that, we don't want to be a communist slave of China. So this whole thing goes back to whether South Korea or North Korea is the legitimate government of the Korean peninsula. So when you peel back the American layer, you find that this is very much an East Asian question. And it's North Korea. It's classic North Korea trying to manipulate history. The communist Chinese do the same thing with history. They just tell lies about history, about the present. They just lie. Communists lie. I mean, that's the basic takeaway from this book. And when you get down to that level, this is very much an East Asian problem and not an American versus South Korea problem.
So
it's interesting from a military standpoint, which I've been involved in my entire life, but the U.S. tends to look down on both South Korea and Japan for their military capabilities. It's almost, my recent dealings, particularly, it's gotten far worse in the last 10 years. But they almost treat them as incompetents. and saying, well, you actually need us to help you, and we need to teach you, or we need to show you, or we need to do for you, whatever. And it's a very condescending attitude from the U.S.
It's true, and I'm not familiar so much with the military, but just in general. And this is where I become very much a radical. Is I think that this is a product of the occupation of both countries after World War II. And that both in South Korea and in Japan, there's a mindset among many people, not on the American side, but on the local side, that we need the Americans to protect us. And my grandfather fought in Korea. He was in the Navy, and his whole life. I mean, he passed away years ago, but his whole life, that was, I think, his proudest moment, is that he was part of this battle to defend the good guys against North Korea. I mean, obviously the bad guys, the communist dictatorship. And he did not look down on the Koreans. I think the people who were in the Korean War, they saw them as brothers. These are brothers. We shed our blood together. And somehow that changed over time. But when I get really radical, I think, South Korea and Japan, these are tough societies, and they don't need the Americans to fight. Long before the Americans ever showed up, these people were fighting in East Asia. So there's a really untapped potential, I think, in these societies. But you're right, the Americans tend to look down on Japan and Korea militarily, intellectually, economically, academically. It's a shame, but there's so much in these societies that can blossom if they don't have this mindset that we have to have the Americans there to protect us.
So are we, Jason, the book is really outstanding, and it's been an honor to have you on. Are we missing anything? And the book's called The Comfort Hoax, a Fake Memoir, North Korean Spies and Hit Squads in the Academic Swamp. Obviously, you're one of the good guys, and you've had to deal with these libs. What are we missing? What do you want to leave the listeners with? And can I come with you back to Japan, and we'll eat ramen and drink coffee out of the vending machines that I'm in love with?
Thank you for having me on the show. It's been an honor. What do I want to leave you with? There's a lot of hope. The cancel culture it's a complete joke. These people are a little Stalinist. They're a little fascist. They don't belong in the academy. They belong in prison, actually. These people that are trying to cancel everyone, they ought to be ashamed of themselves. But there's a lot of hope. There's a lot of people who are waking up, saying this is just not how it should be. So, if you read the book and you think, boy, these people are nuts. Yeah, they're nuts. And there are a lot of people who are going, these people are nuts. So I want listeners and readers to understand that there's a lot of hope in South Korea, Japan, the United States, that we're forming an anti-woke alliance and trying to get people back to where we can just have a discussion again without canceling each other.
Well, outstanding. And we've been joined with Jason Morgan. He's the co-author of The Comfort Hoax, and love to have you back. So next time you're back in America, let us know, and we'll talk more, because this is so interesting. And thanks for joining Veronica Live. We'll be right back. We'll be right back on Veronica Live. Welcome to Veronica Live, and we are here with Daniel Bolz, and he is the author of America's Freedom Megaphone, The Case for Building the Statue of Enduring Freedom. Welcome, Daniel, to Veronica Live.
Well, thank you for having me, Veronica, and co-host John. It's a pleasure to be with you, especially from the one of my favorite states, the Florida Gulf Coast.
That's right. You're talking to folks in Freedom, Florida this morning. But tell us about your background first, Daniel, who you are and what you've been up to the last few years.
Well, let's see. Yeah, I'm a Michigan native, raised in Marquette, Michigan, which is on the shores of Lake Superior, in what's called the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. My dad's a forester. My mother was in theater and was an educator and a musician. Let's see. I went into I'm a third-generation Army veteran. I went in to the Army at the end of the Vietnam War and was stationed with NATO on the Czech border there in southern Germany. I put 12 years in the military and met my wife, Ingrid. She's from eastern Canada. And we've been married now for coming up on 45 years. We raised
Wow.
four daughters,
Wow.
scattered all over the
Outstanding.
country, now raising their own families. So life is good, Veronica and John.
I love it. And fast forward, you've written this interesting book, America's Freedom Megaphone, The Case for Building the Statue of Enduring Freedom. And you are on a mission. And, you know, it was funny. I hadn't thought about it, but the West Coast does not have a Statue of Liberty. And that's like your driving mission now in life, is to come up and build this statue.
Well, yes, absolutely, and we believe that the time is right to build such a historic monument. We've been involved in this project silently since 2017, and only in the last few months have we kind of started, anyway, to go public with the publication of my book. Our publicist, A.J. Rice and his Publius.com team.
Yeah, they're great.
Madly getting me interviews around the country. So we're slowly introducing the Monument Project that way, and there'll be some other ways that we'll be doing that as the budget allows. But yeah, East Coast Statue of Liberty, founding principle, liberty through, of course, the rule of law. And our second founding principle, freedom through the pursuit of happiness. We believe that America was founded on these two principles, liberty and freedom, and that it's now time and appropriate to have the second principle, freedom, represented by a like monument, same height, 305 feet tall, located on the West Coast. And we can tell you more about the details of the monument itself as we go along.
And why do you think we've never had anything on the West Coast? Because I was thinking about it. I lived in Vegas for 4 years, and, it was the Paris Eiffel Tower in Vegas with, like, the monument, or the Luxor. We just, I don't know. We have these stratospheres in Seattle and Vegas. We have nothing. Why do you think that is? And it takes you to, like, push this forward.
Well, wasn't it Victor Hugo who said that there's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come? And I believe that's why it hasn't happened to this point, but I do believe also that the times that we are in now demand that we American citizens build this monument. And it will be a rallying cry. It will be a symbol to unite, freedom-loving American patriots from shore to sea, from sea to shining sea, to collectively, again, through a megaphone. That's, what the title of my book is, through a freedom megaphone, yell loud and clear, dignified, but still nonetheless yelling that America was born free.
Well, the problem is you're wanting to build it on the left coast. so between California, Oregon, and Washington, I can't imagine any of those states giving you a favorable environmental report or anything else. They are so anti-freedom, collectively. And I use that word on purpose, because you would almost think they would prefer a statue of a slave with a ball and chain or something, as their
maybe AOC, John, AOC.
Yeah.
Well, John, you're right. That is a perception, and to some degree, that is a current reality in the United States, that the left coast is, in fact, the left coast, and they've earned that title, dubious though it be. However, we do believe that, nonetheless, there are many millions of common sense patriots, and there are even many of them on the West Coast, that will support the building of this monument. And the thing is, yes, the location, we can explain why we're selecting the West Coast, but the point is that this monument, historical in nature, will be for and is for the United States collectively. It is not for any one particular state, as it were. I mean, yeah, Lady Liberty is in New York, and there are reasons why, she was built there. And the Brother Freedom will be built on the West Coast, and there are reasons for that. But really, the big picture, in 100 years from now, when all three of us have long since passed on and we're wandering around in heaven somewhere, the monument, both of these monuments, will be standing true to declare their message, and it will have nothing to do with the particular states that they are in or the political, realities of their particular state and location.
Well,
it's all about America.
It was funny because, you have a website, freedomalliancellc.com, and, I was poking around, and you have a bunch of, like, the plan, and so, there's kiosks for kids and things, and then I was thinking about it, I was like, wow, it's so true, we need something on the West Coast, because I know when my daughter was a senior, they went to New York, and that's from Florida, but to get to New York from California, that's a haul. So I love the component of rallying, our future freedom fighters at a young age and having a pilgrimage spot on the West Coast. So where do you think this would be? And like, what's the cost? Those are some questions that I had for you as well.
Sure thing, Veronica and John. Let's see, a couple things. Let me see. First of all, because the Statue of Enduring Freedom there's a lot of symbolism to be involved here, and we are doing our best to respect and honor Lady Liberty, and how she was built, the artistic design, which is classic realism, et cetera, the same height. All of that is very important for basically her kid brother, Brother Freedom, to be built. And so, yes, the Statue of Enduring Freedom will be the same height, 305 feet above ground. The location, we think, is a good symbolism analogy to use to look at the north latitude. So Lady Liberty sits at approximately 40 degrees north latitude. When you swing that over to the west coast, that puts you into northern Cal and southern Oregon. We have identified two cities in Northern California, small towns, and that's fine, but two small towns that both have bays, which would be good for such a monument. So, and as far as cost, we have to fund our phase one right now, and that's mentioned on our website. When those funds are secured, then we will be able to drill down and get final costs on building the monument and building the visitor center, and then, of course, funding the educational outreach program that is the real mission of the monument. And your listeners would like to hear this, so let me just mention this. My book introduces a simple solution to our nation's current sickness, to inspire freedom by inspiring our children through educational outreach. It's a propagandized government educational system that got us into the mess that we are in today. Inspiring our children forward to a love of freedom and a love of God is the solution. Truth will prevail and evil will fail. So there's a little bit about what we're all about.
No, I love it. And how's the reception been on this? I mean, now that my light bulb's gone off, and I think the West Coast, we need this statue ASAP because freedom is a problem.
Well, we need it ASAP. And John and Veronica, that's real simple. Just cut us a check for several $100 million, and we'll make sure that it gets built in the next 6 months.
Well, anyways, no, I'm excited about this. And I know in your book you talk a lot about, America's founding principles and freedom and how the media lies. And so tell me, because we just had the State of the Union Thursday night, and I joke with John a lot. I walk around with an airstick bag, so I had my little Veronica Live airstick bag next to me, and it was awful. And he yelled at us, and I've heard this. People have been talking about this analogy. It was like grandpa's on the yard and in the grass yelling at you to get off the grass, and I was like, wow, that's kind of what it was. And it was so divisive. So I wanted your thoughts as a conservative liberty fighter.
Well, Veronica and John, I'm looking right now. I watched it diligently. I have 4 pages of notes from the State of the Union address. Okay. And I have 2 columns. One is called lies. The other column is called truths. And I totaled up my lies. That was the big column, 24. I identified 24 specific lies that President Biden, laid on us. But I do have, in fairness, I identify two truths also, two of them.
Oh, do tell. Start there.
Oh my God! It's just embarrassing, in my opinion. To answer your question, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to have an individual like that leading our country.
Oh,
and
so true.
I often say to my friends, I would pay whatever I have to be sat down in a room with George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Barack Obama, and in this case now Joe Biden. To have those four individuals sit in a room, close the door, lock the door, and have it mic'd, and have those four go at it, as it were, regarding their vision for America, what they've done, what they're doing, and what they intend to do. I would love to have that conversation.
Well, I agree with you. One of the funny takeaways was, I love this. Senator Marco Rubio said that the State of the Union was a proof of life that Biden's alive because obviously they gave him Adderall or something. I was like, I need some of that to clean my house, but anyways, it it was so crazy.
Oh, yes. Yes, it was, and it's good, I suppose, that we can chuckle about that and find some degree of humor. And if you dig down much deeper than that, it just produces a lot of sadness. It does.
It does.
What do you, Daniel? What do you think's happened to patriotism in this country? It seems to be out of style, in particularly in the academic quarter. I mean, most people appreciate the military, and I'm just talking about regular, everyday. The deplorables, as Hillary Clinton called them, but the academics just don't. They seem to hate the country for some reason.
Well, and John, you hit the nail on the head. For some reason, that's another pitching my book. That's another reason for you two and your millions of listeners to reach out to Amazon and buy my book. But because I talk about answering your question. For some reason. Every one of the chapters in my book discusses those reasons. And then, of course, we're providing a positive, uplifting solution. That is to build, this historic monument. But so I've said that, but now, John, specifically, let me answer your question. And I'm reading out of my book, if that's okay. We know that something is wrong in America. Our freedoms have not been adequately studied in public education for at least the last 60 years. The very definitions of America's once common vocabulary, such as freedom, democracy, equality of opportunity, responsibility, God, and the balance of power, have been hijacked and politicized in a way that creates, and this is the key, John, your answer, and that in a way that creates ideologues rather than citizens. This loss of knowledge and critical thought is testing the limits of our republic. And so, John, there's a long answer, but it's still succinct. It's all about our education of our children and in the propagandizement of our children, creating ideologues instead of critical, thinking, intelligent citizens. So there's my answer to your question, John.
Okay, so do you think this... I think you and I are about the same age. I grew up in Williamsburg, Virginia in the late 60s and, 70, 71 kind of time frame. And so my idea of freedom in America, I got a really good early exposure to history and why the war started, the Revolutionary War started, what the principles were, the people that were involved. And you juxtapose that with the 60s radicals, the protest movement, the anti-Vietnam War movement. And that seems to be what did they go into academia and destroy history, in order to move, I don't know if consciously, I'm presuming this is a conscious movement to move their ideology ahead. Again, when I was in high school, we had to take a course called Communism versus Americanism. That taught us, what communism was all about, but that's gone away. That's out of phase, and you may be aware, the Florida legislature is bringing back that course, and there's a huge debate over it.
Well, you're exactly right, John. Again, out of my book, Chapter 2 talks a lot about the educational outreach program of the Statue of Enduring Freedom. We talk about how the infiltration of our American government schools began in the 60s, not only how it began, but why it began, which is probably more important to understand, why it began and why it continues today. The objective of the social engineering liberals who now, are advocating democratic socialism for our form of government instead of a republic, they have specifically infiltrated our educational system, knowing that over time, those individuals will be fodder to be propagandized and will not be free thinking. And that's where we're at today. And that's what we are going to counter with the building of this monument and our educational outreach program.
So do you feel, and John and I talk about this a lot, I personally feel that our society is lacking God and faith and family. And that's one of the reasons that we've lost freedom, because we don't have, these other, I'd say, pillars in your life. So what are your thoughts on that, Daniel?
Absolutely. That is one of the key pillars, again, of our educational outreach program, to reinstate a respect for God and his role in the formation of America. For instance, the phrase that the three of us and your listeners are aware of, and that is American exceptionalism. Mm-hmm. That term has a specific definition, and it has been bastardized, if I can use that term on your radio station.
Good word.
It has been changed, it has been modified, it has been vilified to not mean what it actually means. And so we go into that completely. And yes, the point is there are reasons why a respect for God has been taken out of the schools and out of our country, as it were, out of the public square. There's a reason for that. And it all has to do with the underpinnings of socialism and communism and everybody that is involved in that side wanting to do what? Yeah, that's right. Fundamentally transform America.
Right. Very true. And then the other question is, we're just out of control, our border with all of these illegals. And, my mother was a legal immigrant. My father and mother-in-law were both legal immigrants, but they assimilated. And, I just feel like we're losing our country, and it's not feeling like America with what's going down. So how do
Veronica,
you feel?
Veronica, on the topic of immigrants, Chapter 3, what we do in Chapter 3 of my book it's called Warning Voices from Immigrants. We talk about the history of immigration in the United States, but then, most importantly in that chapter, we quote many, I don't know, maybe it's 25 or 30 immigrants of all different ages, old people and young teenagers and college students who have legally immigrated to the United States from third world countries, from countries where the socialism was, the form of government, or communism, maniac dictators, et cetera, et cetera. So we honor immigrants, we love them, and we love them when they come in to assimilate, basically, to become an American, to embrace our culture, while still keeping their own culture alive and honoring that, but also, equally important, to assimilate into the American culture. And so anyway, we discussed the whole topic of immigration quite a bit in my book in Chapter 3.
Okay, well, your book is it's available on Amazon, and it's got 2 5-star reviews. So, is there anything? What? How do people get involved? I mean, is this something you're doing on your own, or are you looking for people to come join
the team, the Freedom Team?
There you go, the Freedom Movement. Yeah, they can join them. The easiest way, John, to do that is to go to our website, freedomalliancellc.com. There they'll get the introduction, overview of the book, and they can order it directly there through Amazon. But more importantly, they'll also be able to get an an overview of the project, of the monument. They'll be able to see images and our sculpture of the monument as it's developed right now with our sculptors in Chicago in their studio. So they'll be able to see it. They'll be able to understand the design, the elements that are in Brother Freedom, et cetera, and yeah, they can join as well and help us out that way. So we're just starting. I mean, there it is. I'm a regular citizen. I don't have $10 million in the bank. So we're doing the best we can with what we have. And eventually, if the monument's meant to be, it will happen. And we have plans for that. Don't get me wrong. We have very specific plans to move this project forward. And we're about that as quickly as we can. So Freedom Alliance, for your listeners, freedomalliancellc.com.
And I guess you should, aren't you fully retired now, relaxing, but you have this in your heart. So what is inspiring you to get this done quickly for the world?
Well, yeah, there you go. I guess it's something I believe in, and I have believed in this project and this topic, more specifically the topic, since the early 20s when I wrote that essay that's on our website about preservation of America. So I've been at this in my mind for many, many years. And you're right, I'm retired now, and this is kind of what I'm doing, and my wife helps me and supports me as she can. So there it is.
Well, we've been joined on Veronica Live with Daniel Bolz. He's the author of the book America's Freedom Megaphone, and he's trying to build this this wonderful statue on the West Coast. And you can find more info on Amazon. You can buy the book, and you can go to freedomalliancellc.com. And Daniel, it's been such a pleasure. We love hosting freedom fighters out there that are fighting for our country.
Thanks, Veronica and John. It's been a pleasure, and perhaps we can do this again.
Excellent. Would love that. And we'll be right back on Veronica Live. Welcome back to Veronica Live. And oh my gosh, John, we've already had a full show talking about, the comfort hoax and who was a prostitute in Korea and Japan and who wasn't. That was amazing because that guy, the co-author, Jason Morgan, you can tell these people are not political, honestly. I mean, they don't have their shingle out there like you and I do. And then they get roped into this madness of being canceled and threatening emails from a professor. I mean, it was awful when you read the book.
Well, some of it is really interesting because of just the scale of the hoax, and North Korea being involved in it. But and it exploits a traditional, Japanese, South Korean, irritation between the two countries. And some of the and it still goes on today, like he mentioned Jeju Island, which is a vacation spot for South Koreans, and that is a contested island between Japan and South Korea over who owns it. So there's, as I said, it's South Korea was occupied by Japan for a long time, and there's a lot of resentment about it. So the Comfort Woman story plays into that resentment. But and the thing we didn't explore with them was really more the history of prostitution goes back to biblical times. Okay,
right.
So it's not something new, and it's been around for a long time, and it's changed forms. And he mentioned that it was became a regulated industry.
Well, and that was the thing in the book was some families made money off of it. When their daughter in a month could make 2 years worth of salary. Some women wanted control and they wanted the money. So I don't know. It's funny though. Isn't it funny when societies try to change the history and don't tell you the truth? Because I think we've had some of that happen here in America with Black history and
absolutely
the DEI crap and this white exceptionalism. I mean, it's baloney. George Washington was white. People.
What do you think this whole thing about tearing down the statues is all about? It's about destroying history. They don't like history, and back to they don't like America. America is you are the sum of your history. Everybody is
well,
the sum
and
of their
they
history.
never. A lot of these crazy African Americans never want to tell the story about African American slaveholders, and there were a few of them. So,
right,
exactly. That gets canceled out, and they try to write their own story. It was only white people that hated them.
And isn't Kamala the Clown Harris? Wasn't her some relatives of her slave owners, black slave owners? Oh yeah. Let's talk about that one. So, it is all about erasing history and or modifying history to fit whatever your view is, and that back to you can't change objective truth into subjective truth. It doesn't work that way.
Well, and where is the real historical books? I mean, we had that author on recently, and I ordered his book, so I have it downstairs, Larry. And if you follow him on Twitter, he's amazing. But I'm ready to read that book because I feel like I've missed a lot of history. But today, I don't even know if the kids are getting the real history in schools. I don't think they are.
Right, as Jason, they're getting a version of history, but it's not the version of history, and there's a big difference. And the
Hollywood version. Oscars are they tomorrow night?
Yeah, they're getting the subjective truth. I liked how the one activist got up there and says, "Well, my truth," and it's like, no, there's no my truth. Okay, truth is truth. Period.
Well, no, I enjoyed talking with Jason, who actually lives in Japan, and I just finished season 1 of Tokyo Vice, which is outstanding, and just because Asian culture is different, and I don't know, we have a lot going for us when it comes to equality here in America, even though you hear these libs and there's like no equality, but I
watched episode 3 of Shogun last night. So.
Oh, okay. My son says that's excellent. So I have not. That's next in the queue. I got to get through season 2 of Tokyo Vice because season 1 ended with a bang, and I was like, "What? So, yes, but it's outstanding. If you want to, isn't Shogun? That's old times, right?
Right. It's back in the age of the samurai.
Yes.
And actually, it's interesting because it's when Western values and Western warfare and equipment were being introduced into Japan, into that feudal system.
Okay, so and Tokyo Vice kind of is when, like, the Walkman era. It's an American that wants to embrace being a reporter for a Japanese paper, and it's just an amazing story. But, but we had an amazing, we only have a couple minutes before our next guest, but the State of the Union was Thursday night, John, and I was taking
State of the Union
notes.
Was sad.
Oh, well, what was really interesting was he was late, and so all the people were like, "Oh, it's past his bedtime, but he's late," because they had all those Gaza protesters, and he definitely was so. He definitely been hyped up with something.
Right, but he was angry. I mean, the whole thing.
Was angry.
It was the Angry Joe show. But and I've heard some analysis of it, and probably the best one I heard was that speech was not aimed at America. It wasn't aimed at the Republicans. It was aimed at the contenders that want to push Joe Biden off the ballot on the Democrat side. That's what that whole speech was about, was to show them that he's not going away without a big, big, big fight.
Well, and Senator Rubio said it was proof of life. It was proof of life that he's kicking,
right. So that whole thing was aimed at the hardcore left Democrats that want Joe Biden out and want somebody else in. And so I think the convention, and this is really what it told me, was the convention is not going to end up being unless he collapses or something between now and then. But the convention is not going to be a brokered convention. It's going to be a Joe Biden rematch against Trump.
Well,
and
just
Kamala Harris is going to be right there in the middle of it, so nothing's going to change. You've got it set.
It was just so negative. I didn't leave with a kumbaya. I love my country. it just everything about it. So I definitely want to get into it when we come back after our next guest. But the father, there was a father that yelled during the Gold Star Father, and he screamed, "Abbey Gate, remember the 13, say my son's name," and so anyways, on Twitter, I didn't know who he was. I was like, oh, what's the backstory? And so the backstory was his son was one of the 13 killed, and he wanted recognition from Joe Biden. And fast forward a year later, his second son committed suicide at the gravesite of that son that was killed because it was too much for the family. And so I had my biggest tweet ever go viral because I just wrote, there was somebody that ran down and said who he was. And so I just wrote, thanks for running that down. So sad. We are all still pissed on the Afghanistan withdrawal debacle and stand with Steve and his family. And I've had 24,000 views and several hundred likes. And that's just a very simple tweet, but people are still mad, people are still mad about it. So I pray for that family.
Apparently Joe Biden has never bothered to contact any of the families of those troops that were killed in his disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan.
Isn't that disgusting? So disgusting.
He can't take
disgusting.
2 minutes to call. And I'll contrast it with Trump this week. There's a sheriff down in Marion County that's retiring. Mm-hmm. And he actually called the Dan Bongino lives in Marion County, and he called Dan Bongino on his phone and left a message for this sheriff who Trump knows.
I did hear it.
And it was impressive. It's like, here is this guy running for president of the United States, takes 5 minutes and sits there and makes a phone call and personally thanks this sheriff for his service and everything that he's done.
Yeah, it was very nice.
Very, to me, that very nice. All the crap they say about Trump, forget it. That tells me
it's baloney. And 13 people were killed serving their country in a foreign land and don't even get the frickin' president to call. Right. So it's disgusting. But we'll get into more of this in the State of the Union because, John, we have to dissect all this. Oh, my gosh. And we haven't even gotten to the afterburner. But we'll be right back on Veronica Live. Welcome to Veronica Live, and we are here with our next guest this morning, and he is a lawyer here in Panama City, and his name is Eric Garmon, and he's running to be our next state attorney. So welcome, Eric. We love having candidates on the show.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
So tell us your background. Let's start there. Where you went to school, how you ended up becoming a lawyer, and what kind of law that you actually do practice.
Sure. I grew up on Panama City Beach, attended elementary, middle, and high school there. And then after high school, I joined the Marine Corps. It was right after the towers had been hit, so I did what so many of us did in that era. And then after my Marine Corps service, I returned back home and enrolled in community college and then decided, I still have that yearn to serve right now. So I went into law enforcement, and I was in law enforcement for 5 years active. And then about 5 years in, I said, well, maybe I want to go back to school, but I still definitely want to be involved in what I'm doing. So the natural choice was then made to go to law school. But when I went to law school, I still served my community in a reserve officer capacity. And I did that until just about a year and a half ago. So I'm actually still hold current law enforcement standards.
Oh, wow.
And, so my service kind of went from the Bay County Sheriff's Office to Panama City Police Department, where I was a training officer and a traffic homicide investigator. And then when I was in the reserve capacity, I served for Panama City Beach, Parker, and the Bay District schools. So I also got to see quite a large array and difference in the not only community, but the levels and sizes of the agency and the different challenges that they can face. It really at every level. So after that, and while I was still being a reserve officer, I became an attorney here locally. I've been an attorney here locally for 7 years now. and I practice in the Panama City area. I handle criminal matters, and I also handle transactional matters. I try to keep some things that are a little more boring and predictable, having 2 5-year-olds. So it's,
And what does transactional mean? What kind of law are you doing there? Like contracts or?
Yeah, that's right. Contract reviews and things like that. So, that's a little easier to plan around, but definitely my heart and my passion is still in the courtroom. I love any opportunity I can to advocate. And I also do just a lot of volunteer work, not only with veterans, being a veteran myself, but also with victims and victims' rights.
Wow. And what made you want to become a lawyer? Because it is it's a different thing, though, versus serving in a uniform. Is it trying to help the people?
It is. I mean, at the end of the day, I looked around and I said, I want something a little more, as far as educationally. So I knew I had to go back to school. So really the clear choice there, if I wanted to stay in that field, would either be, federal law enforcement or the law. And many times, the law can lead to the same. So I knew that a law degree would not only give me just a wonderful base of knowledge and education. It's really just, the foundational degree for a lot of, again, federal, law enforcement jobs and beyond. So I went into law school with a really open mind, not knowing if maybe I'd go back in as a JAG officer or whatnot. But I just every time I leave the community, I want to come back, and every time I come back, I want to serve. So it's just beautiful. Kind of a natural, lifelong pull, if you will. I mean, right. I've served in government at the city, the county, the state, and now the federal level as well, as I worked for the Veterans Administration for about a year during COVID. So I've seen every level of it, and every level has definitely different challenges, but also definite, things you can learn and take away and make yourself better.
Very true.
So Eric, what makes you want to jump into the swamp of politics?
with the good old boys and girls.
Yeah, right. You're obviously taking on an incumbent here, and
right.
Politics is hardball. It's not.
John stole my question. I need a lawyer.
Well, look, politics is hardball, and I think as long as you understand that you're entering that realm willingly, and if you're doing it for the right reasons and with a servant's heart, then it's okay. People are going to say things about you, or whether they're true or not. And I'm sure the same thing happens to my opponent. But you just have to remember why you're serving and what you're looking to achieve. And as far as what made me want to jump in, again, I've got 2 5-year-olds. I call them twins. They're adopted. They're only 4 months apart. So
wow.
Most people look like I have a leg growing out of my head when I said I'm going to run for office at that. Because, free time is definitely not, as a parent, one of your things. But, look, anything worth doing is usually going to be hard. And if you only did the easy things in life, then, well, not really a life that I believe is worth living. So when I looked at running, it's really it's the same thing. It's the same reason that I joined the Marine Corps. It's the same reason that I joined the police force. It's answering a call that I saw and seeing that there's what I perceive to be an issue, and I can fix it. So luckily, I've got a very supportive wife that said, absolutely, I believe that you can fix it too. So I saw an issue, and I saw a problem in our community, and I said, well, I'm going to fix it.
So taking on an incumbent is really hard. I go back to the wars back when Jim Appleman was state attorney and Chris Patterson was running against him, and my wife and I were very, very strong supporters of Chris, and he narrowly lost, to the incumbent, and you are taking on an incumbent here. So what is it that you see as the problem, and why are you running, or why do you think you can fix it?
Sure. Well, as far as what problems do I see, we don't have that long of a show, but what I can tell you is it really all can boil down to a primary thing. I mean, there are definitely a few large topics, but one is just extreme inefficiency. And it's more than just, we're spending money where we shouldn't. And otherwise, it's also, it has effect on the actual prosecution of cases and the pendency of cases. And a good for example is my opponent has been a prosecutor for a very long time. He'll be the first to tell you, look, I've been a prosecutor for 36 years. I'm not going to tell you that he's a bad prosecutor. What I'm going to tell you is that his experience is extremely limited. It is limited to the one role of being a prosecutor and now being the elected state attorney. But there's not a lot of life experience outside mixed in. And how does that interplay with the state, local, federal systems? How does that interplay with the business owners? Where he has more prosecutorial experience than me, I have a lot more experience in business than him. And really a lot of the issues that I saw were as a businessman. I mean, I've been running a business or two or three since I left the police force in 2011. And just as you kind of break the skin off your knuckles as a business owner and you're sitting around making hard choices, especially as far as staff and recruiting and opportunity costs and all the just the normal things, you learn a lot of hard lessons. And those are not lessons that you necessarily always are going to learn in a governmental role. And I can say that having been in a governmental role. So when you start looking at that, it can lead to a lot of other things, and I'd be happy to expand on that if you'd like.
Well, I guess tell us how big the role is. Like, how many counties will you be overseeing? So people that don't understand what the state attorney does, kind of fill us in.
Sure. The state attorney is the chief elected prosecutor, and some would say the chief law enforcement officer, because at the end of the day, whether a case goes forward or not is up to you. But for a 6-county area, and for our area, that's Bay, Jackson, Holmes, Calhoun, Gulf, and Washington. Now, that's a large area. In some areas of the state, it's only one county because it's really population-based. The 1st District, which is west of us, is only 4 counties, for instance. But you're the chief elected prosecutor, and really the buck stops with you in your area. I mean, it's there is an elected attorney general, and a lot of people will say, "Oh, well, good luck. A statewide race must be hard." And I'm like, no, that's a different role. But you're really the buck stops with you, not even with the attorney general. I mean, the attorney general may pick it up in special instances where there's multi-counties involved or an appeal, but in most matters in criminal and circuit court, you or your staff have the ultimate say in charging decisions, right? And the problem right now is not only is it a large role for the elected state attorney, it's a large role for any of his assistants, because he's saying, I'm entrusting you to stand in my place. And where that role becomes very large, especially in prosecutorial overreach or danger, is Florida is an information state. So if a charge comes in, the ultimate and complete decision whether or not to charge somebody falls on one person. It's not a grand jury. Now, there are instances in Florida with a grand jury, but it falls on one person. And right now, you don't have any consistency in those charging decisions and any consistency in training. So you get a large, varied result. And not only that, when you as the state attorney or as the assistant state attorney, when you raise your hand and you swear under a formal charging document that somebody has committed a crime, you're swearing that you've talked to the witnesses, you've done all that you can do. And what we find, and what you can easily find just by a review of records, is most times there's absolutely no review, right? And that's bad on two ends. That's bad if you're falsely accused of a crime and there's exonerative evidence. I mean, a lot of times there's body camera that completely is different than a report, and that happens. I mean, that's not saying anything against a police officer. It's just sometimes there's evidence that's completely in the face of what's being alleged. But somebody might be facing felony or misdemeanor charges for 5 and 6 months before a video finally gets watched. That's an issue. But alternatively, if you're not reviewing anything, somebody that maybe the cop or the investigator forgot to give one document, and if you're not reaching back out to those police officers and following up and doing what you're supposed to do and watch those videos and make a full decision, then you very well might be letting somebody go that shouldn't be let go. So really, either way, with no intake process and with no screening process other than just, these prosecutors who are overworked, and look, they're doing the absolute best they can. I mean, they've got 450 cases. This is just a nationwide issue. It's not locally, but a local issue is, all over the state, there are intake departments. There are, specialized units, and there's no reason that it cannot be done here. And really, I would say justice demands it.
So are you saying, I've got two questions on what you've been saying. So my first one, who are the reviewing people? Are they not reviewing everything, is what you're saying? Is that the state attorney and the assistant state attorney, or the other lawyers that are working for them? That's question one. And then if nobody's reviewing your stuff, and you're saying some people get let off, are we letting people languish in prison while we're waiting for this as well?
Absolutely. So as to question number one, right now, I won't say that no one is reviewing it, but they're not always reviewing it. So if you go to a hospital and you walk in, you don't just walk in with having no questions asked to you. They take you back and they say, "All right, we're gonna cut your arm off." You're like, "Oh, I'm here for sinus infection. What are you talking about?"
Right.
So we need a robust intake department, right? And the intake department, look, you have such a large volume of cases that are things still going to be missed? Sure, things will always be missed if you don't look. And I can give many examples, and many others can, to where again, it's just the very short narrative that the prosecutors have time to read is different. So if you had a prosecutor or two, we have a smaller office here than, Miami or something like that, but at least one prosecutor who's a very seasoned prosecutor and knows the different, ins and outs and how things go. And they have even a staff of investigators or even paralegals to just watch videos. Then so much can be caught. And I know that this can be done. The public defender's office reviews every video that comes through their door, right? So is it hard? Yes. But again, just because something's hard does not mean it shouldn't be done, especially when you're dealing with somebody's life in the wake. A very good example of this, a gentleman was pulled over, and he was accused of having drugs. It ended up that the drugs in the vehicle, not only was the car not his, he was borrowing it to go get his sister, but the vehicle were his father's, and they were seizure medicine, and they were in the glove box, right? So when the cops see it, he hands the bottle to them. He's a CDL Class A driver, and the cops on the video say, "Listen, I know that you didn't know about these drugs. I know that the vehicle is not yours. I know they're basically, you didn't know anything about this. We're still taking you to jail. And that doesn't mean the charge is going to stick. If you tell the judge all this in the morning, I'm sure he'll throw it out." Now, again, that's a training issue on the cop. I don't believe that cop was acting nefariously. I just think there's a training issue there. But on the state attorney side, by the time the prosecutors watched that video, 5 months had elapsed, and formal charges had already been levied. And, he was unable to work because he's drug tested every week. He's a Class A CDL driver, and he's being held on felony charges.
What's a class? What kind of driver is that? What does that mean?
That's your highest. Yeah, that's your CDL, your commercial. You can drive large semi-trucks.
Oh, wow. So it impacted him financially and everything. Wow.
Absolutely.
Oh,
and his family.
Rough.
And, to the prosecutor's credit, when it got reassigned and a prosecutor finally watched it, the reaction was, man, this is just absolutely disgusting, and we're so sorry, and we'll help do what we can to expunge the gentleman's record. But the fact of the matter is if that video had been watched, then that case would have been over very shortly. He never would have been formally charged. And more importantly, things like this are also clogging our jails. I mean, our jail has consistently been overcrowded. And Hurricane Michael was an issue, COVID was an issue, but we're far and away from that. We've got people sitting in jail for 60 days on camping on the beach and other charges that the jail, absolutely, people need to be in there. There are people that do not belong in society, but there are also, when we're paying Walton County upwards of $2 million a year to house our excess, then we need to be taking a lot harder look, a lot faster at cases. So that's just one example as to things not being reviewed, and it's really a system, right? So when I decided to run for state attorney, I did what I would do when I start any business, and that's formulate a business plan, right? Look at where our process is weak, and unfortunately, in the regular, the business world, if a process is weak or not efficient, then you lose money. But if a process is weak or not efficient in this context, people's liberties can be affected. And again, that can also be, unfortunately, sometimes letting folks, go that maybe there was evidence that they just didn't have. But so that gets to the first part of your question. As to the second part of your question, I'm sorry, compound question. Can you remind me what that?
Well, it was kind of like, are people languishing in prison? Because John and I just hosted an author that wrote the American Gulag Chronicles, and it's our J6 prisoners. Literally, they're languishing in prison for 3 years. Can't get their legal, appointed attorney half the time. They've been treated so bad, and I'm with you. There's criminals. Some people aren't always criminals. And honestly, I don't know if all these people that are in the jail are actually criminals, except for people don't like their politics. And so after reading that book and having the author on, it's horrible what goes down in prison. And I don't want anybody languishing in prison that doesn't belong there. Right. And
Sure.
Since when, if you've committed a misdemeanor, you're languishing in prison for 3 years. So anyways, that was my next question is who's languishing in prison? And then you talked about paying that other county $2 million to house these prisoners. Could you not use that money? Are you authorized as a state attorney to reallocate that money to hire one or two more lawyers to get through that stuff quickly so that you don't have to have this excess prisoners in other counties? Yeah, I keep asking you compound questions. Sorry. I've had a lot of coffee.
And that's a really complicated one, right? Because that money really would be more from the county commissioner in the jail, depending on what pot it's coming from.
Okay.
So I'm not sure that any of the funds would be part of the state attorney's office, but what you'll hear, I invite you, and actually, really, I invite you just to go down to an arraignment or a pretrial criminal one day. It's 100, 200 people come through. And another thing that you'll hear is, I'd love to get a deal. I'd love to talk to the prosecutor. And the prosecutor very aptly and correctly says, well, listen, I don't have time to come down to the jail and talk to you alone. And if you really want to talk to me, hire a lawyer or public defender. Well, again, the jail, and I've confirmed this with the warden, the jail has plenty of empty rooms, and they have interview rooms. Either assign permanently or 1 or 2 days a week, have a prosecutor go to the jail. I mean, hey, you want to make a deal with it? You want to take a plea? Then here I am. Do you have a question about your case? Let's get it going. Again, that's something that costs you nothing extra, right? I'm not having to come on and hire anybody extra, but there was a case in Jackson County, blanking on her name, but Janine, she was a former tax collector employee, and they tried her 4 times. Well, on the morning of the 4th trial, she took a plea to the charges, but they had one prosecutor. Okay, they had one prosecutor assigned to that case. The only case that prosecutor had, and they were paying that prosecutor $147,000 a year. Give or take, and there was a mistrial, witness tampering, and some other issues. But as far as inefficiencies go, I mean, you could have funded probably 2 prosecutors off of that salary. But again, between political favors and however else you want to justify it, that could have easily funded 3 or 4 investigators or paralegals to watch videos. So the money is there. And again, a lot of these things are just process issues, leadership choices. A good example of that also is, at the end of the day, the last time that you had Mr. Bassford on your show, he said, it's our job to make sure that no innocent person is ever prosecuted for a crime they did not commit. I would contend to you that what I've just laid out, that's very commonly not what's happening. Now, even at the end of the day, if they do dismiss the case, 6 months, a year, 2 years in, well, that still has greatly affected your life for 2 years, and Google doesn't have an expiration date, right? So
right.
You now have a large history for employers, but yet again, under Mr. Hess's, the previous state attorney, under his rule, the former chief prosecutor for major crimes has, at the time had 25 plus years of experience, very experienced, and had a 30-0 conviction rate on murders, right? He won 30 of 30 murders. He just, again, leadership sometimes is being comfortable with being uncomfortable, and sometimes maybe there's a person that you might not, invite over for dinner, but they're still the best person for the job. So Mr. Sambathi, the former head of major crimes, was relieved of his duty, and a much younger prosecutor was brought in, and there's nothing wrong with younger prosecutors, but maybe bring him in as a number 2. And since then, and since that choice, we've lost 6 murder trials, and 4 of those in Bay County, and 2 in Jackson County, 1 in Washington, and 3 in Bay. And I would say that's 6 too many, for really 2 reasons. One, if you're not doing your correct homework, then maybe you shouldn't have taken that case to trial. But if you do and you have the experience, that's not making us safer. And again, there's really no reason why Mr. Sambathi, and I'm sure he may or may not like me throwing him out there, but look, he did a wonderful job, and he's one of the examples of some wonderful prosecutors that, because of some of the internal issues, have left the office and really left a vacuum of experience. That doesn't mean that they're not doing a wonderful job there now. I mean, really, the office, the assistant prosecutors are great, but losing 6 murders is not a good look. And it's every case is different. But when you go from 30-0 to whatever the current record is in 6, there's something is going on.
Well, I go ahead, John.
I was going to say, Eric, do you think there's this what it speaks to me is consistency, and it seems across the state there's this inconsistency in the state attorney's offices, and I'm not sure, what the relationship is with the state, with Ashley Moody's office, state attorney, and then the district state attorneys, for uniformity, because we've seen Governor DeSantis remove, I think, was it the Orlando district attorney, because she wouldn't charge for capital crimes. She was just saying, hey, it's off the table, for the death penalty, and that's a legitimate, that's not the prosecutor's job to make that kind of decision. I don't think the law is the law. Your job is to, bring charges in accordance with the law and follow the law. If you don't like the law, then get out of the job. But how do you bring that consistency to the office? And the example of reviewing the body cam is an excellent example. Does that require the state legislature to pass something that says, the state attorneys will, for people that are charged with the crime and where there's a body cam, that the state attorney's office will review that video within 48 hours.
A couple days.
Pick something up, right? But don't just let it drag on, and add consistency to it across the state so that everybody's equally protected.
Yes, sir. I think that's a great question. And what I would say is, unfortunately, that's a question more for the ballot box and less for the legislature, because the challenges of Citrus County are infinitely different than the challenges of our county, right? So if you start trying to rule and regulate by shalls, then sometimes those just are not appropriate, right? So that's why they give a lot of levity and a lot of leverage to the acting and elected state attorney to say, what's good for our area. But I also would say that, to your point a little bit, there are certain things that are good for any area, right? It doesn't matter where you are. And, one of the things that I've done is another benefit that I have is I was a police officer under two previous state attorneys, right? So when I'm looking around and I'm saying this seems crazy, well, it is. I mean, it has not always been this way, right? It has not always been this way. We are in a uniquely, inefficient time that really we haven't seen in this area, at least in my 20 years, or I would say 19 years, almost there, in law enforcement, one capacity or another. But a good example is look, leadership is top down, right? Anytime, you'll never hear me in court say, oh, well, my secretary didn't do X, Y, Z, right? It's my name on the bottom of the document. It's mine. Well, the state attorney's name is on the bottom of every document that comes out of that office. So there are certain things that you should be taking into account on yourself to do. And a good example is, for instance, domestic violence. Okay, domestic violence is an issue all around the state, and it's an issue here as well. And under it's 741.2901, if you want to look it up, it's the domestic violence promulgation that was passed statutory, and it gives some shalls, right? And these are things that are not really, they're not optional. And one of the things, and this is what the current state attorney's office, the sheriff's office, I mean, really all the law enforcement, they get this part right, where it says that they shall adopt a pro-prosecution stance on domestic violence, right? If you can determine a primary aggressor, then we need to be going forwards on prosecution and defending victims. They completely, in my experience, negate the entire first subsection, which says that each state attorney shall, not could, maybe, would be great, they shall develop special units or assign prosecutors to specialize in the prosecution of domestic violence cases, right? And that's because domestic violence is an extremely tricky, I mean, look, and I'm telling you this, again, from many years in law enforcement, seeing it. And that's one of the things that can really differentiate me is, I have been boots on the ground in the living rooms, putting handcuffs on people. So it's one thing to have the back end of the case, and definitely that's a very important part, but it's also a lot different when you see those victims bawling their eyes out one moment and then, trying to attack you to protect their attacker the next. So you really need somebody that can specialize in that. And it's not that you need it. It's that the state of Florida has said, you shall do this. And I can tell you in my dealings, the domestic violence, again, there's really no intake. It's just whatever division it gets assigned to, right? So there is, to say there's no intake would be a misstatement. There is an intake insofar as that the case is filed and then it's assigned a division. I mean, and so that is it. But then you have anyone from 6 months or 1 day of experience all the way up to, 30 years of experience taking these cases on. And that's why you can get a very different kind of reaction across the board, and that's why one consistent voice of an intake department could help guide that and specialize in that as required. So there are certain things that just aren't done, and there's really not a great reason for it. And I mean, again, it costs nothing to get a person. It costs nothing to make divisions, right, and to get specializations. And our office used to do that. They used to do that. Right now, the major crimes division is one person. So that's not really a division.
Well, I've got a lot of questions, so I'm going to do a rapid fire round.
Yeah.
So you better be good because
on,
I could talk to you all day because I feel like I'm in my own
Bay County,
my own.
juries. I mean, there's so much
Yeah,
stuff,
my own Law and Order episode here, which I watched every episode. So just so you know. But anyways, rapid fire. So I'll just throw out topics, and I want your opinion. A sentence or two. DUIs.
Sure. Well, I used to be a DUI enforcement officer, so no one in the world wants to keep people off the road more. But we also do need to have a much more robust prevention program with alcohol counseling and treatment for first-time offenders where there's no property damage or injury.
Okay, illegal immigrants.
Enforce what we have, right? The problem there really is the federal government. The worst thing you can do sometimes is put an ICE hold because now all of a sudden the federal government gets involved. So that's really working closely with the Sheriff's Department and otherwise to come up with, like Texas and many other places have in Florida, a different route.
Protecting children and sex offenders.
No, as a parent and just as a human, there's no greater need. And again, having an intake department, and I know that you've limited me to short, but human trafficking comes to mind.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, human trafficking, the signs of that are not something everybody's trained to pick up on. So a lot of that can be missed. And one of the positions I want is to advocate for the state of Florida, not just locally, to have human trafficking an enhancement placed because almost never is somebody actually charged with human trafficking. It's usually the easier crime that has the longer sentence. But for tracking purposes, it makes it very hard for us to say, well, how much of a human trafficking problem do we have? And that's nationwide. So if we can tack an enhancement on any crime, that would help. And that would definitely help children because a lot of human trafficking, unfortunately, involves children.
Okay, Second Amendment and red flag laws.
Well, I'm a lifetime endowed Patriot member of the NRA, so I very much believe in guns and the citizen's right to a gun. And as far as red flag laws, that's really that's a civil proceeding initiated by the sheriff, so that's not something I'd have very much control on. But I would very happily give an investigator or a prosecutor to an advisory group if they asked for that.
Drugs, fentanyl.
Look, drugs and fentanyl are horrible. Fentanyl's tricky because now they're adding fentanyl to almost everything. So if you get cocaine, it's going to also test as fentanyl. But Governor DeSantis has done a wonderful job, and he's actually passed a lot harsher penalties on fentanyl. So you'll find no quarter from me if you're out selling drugs. If you're using drugs and you have an issue, then you'll also find no one that wants to get you help more than me.
Okay, murderers. I think you want to prosecute them.
Absolutely. I mean, look, I want to not only prosecute them, I want to prosecute them as quickly and expeditiously as possible because, it's being able to give that victim closure.
Okay, working with Sheriff's Office, Beach PD, FBI, DOJ. Who am I missing?
Oh, there's a lot. It's acronym alphabet salad, but look again. That's an active role. That's an active choice. That's taking your investigators and signing them as a liaison to each department, so the department knows who they can talk to. But it's also getting a crime analyst, right? What in the world is even going on in our county, and let's help maybe plug that together and stop larger trends.
And then I texted you this because I wanted to see if you could talk about it, and you said you could. Your opinion about what's been happening to President Trump. I mean, this is on the national level, but it's just been a nightmare, I think.
It introduced a new word called lawfare to the current vocabulary.
Sure. So what I can tell you is I'm not deeply familiar with every case, but I think the frustration that a lot of people see is the frustration that we're seeing here locally, right? And that's a two-tiered system of justice. And that is, at the end of the day, the good example is the Fannie Willis case in Georgia. You have somebody that very clearly knew they had a compromised position in a conflict, right? I mean, I don't think there's any guess of that. But instead of just selecting another individual, they fought and wanted, their person on there. A good example of that is, my opponent's son and daughter-in-law both work for the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission, and they bring charges daily and weekly to the office. And I have no knowledge of him ever saying this is a conflict. I can't expect the people working for me to be able to feel free to do what they need to do with that case. And similarly, a lot of times conflicts aren't filed when they should be, and they are otherwise. It needs to be across the board, right? And it's a little more work and it's a little frustrating, but it's what justice demands. So, anytime you see this, it's an issue. And what I would say is that, another thing that we're seeing, whether it's the classified documents case or the New York fraud case, where it's 2-year misdemeanor that they had to finagle into, pair with a federal crime to extend the statute of limitations. Even if it is a crime, minor or otherwise, if it's something that no one else is getting hit with, and all of a sudden a political opponent is being hit with it, that's when it starts raising eyebrows, and something that may be proper starts to really feel improper. And again, you had that. You have a lot of that here locally. And again, I could talk for a very long time about examples and otherwise, but I think that the real issue and the real heartburn locally is the exact same heartburn that we're feeling with President Trump, right? And if you don't like what's happening to him, I would tell you wouldn't like a lot of what's going on around here. And the problem is that there's really no reason for it. You can get other people. Either it's a good charge or it's a bad charge, and if it's not, you get them the next time. But what it starts doing is it starts slowly eroding the faith in the criminal justice system, and then that spills over to jurors and otherwise. And, to get a political win, you really erode at the overall system and our Constitution.
So, Eric, you're running to be our next state attorney. Final question. Why should voters choose you, Eric Garmon, to be our next state attorney?
I've served my community in one way or another for 20 years. And look, it's what I was made to do. I've got a great life right now. I'm an attorney. I'm married with 2 wonderful children, but I've decided to take this on because my community needs it. And what you need to know is that criminals and people who truly commit a crime will find absolutely no fiercer opponent than myself. But if you have not truly committed a crime, or if it's questionable, we're going to look into it, and we're going to make sure that you're being treated fairly. It's not the criminal prison system, it's the criminal justice system. And sometimes justice, it's not even being soft on crime. It's being very hard on crime, but being logical and having that stance to be able to say, you know what, no, not on this one. So if you want somebody that's going to make sure that bad people go away to jail and that you're treated fairly, go to Garmon2024.com. You can find out more there. I'm on Facebook as well, and I'd love to meet with anybody who'd like to meet with me as well.
Well, it's been a pleasure getting to know you, and John and I appreciate you coming on Veronica Live this morning, and at Garmon2024.com, and we'll definitely have you back.
Thank you so much.
Good luck, Eric.
We'll be right back on Veronica Live. Welcome back to Veronica Live, and now you've got John and I to talk all the issues. I still want to talk about, it was quite a week, John. Nikki Haley finally dropped out. Thank you. Oh, my gosh.
Well, we had Super Tuesday, and Trump just cleaned her clock across the country. I think, what is she, won Washington, D.C., which is like, okay, that's
she won Washington, D.C. and Vermont, and so she kind of stuck around. Oh, my gosh, I need coffee. Stuck around because she wanted to be the first woman ever to win a primary. So she has that little feather in her cap now, but she came out with her speech, and I don't like the way she talks, I guess. I wish I had time to study her her mannerisms because I would try to do a Nikki Haley impression. But yeah, so she lost. Trump just cleaned everybody's clock. Alan West won. He is now the new Texas GOP chairman. So I was messaging him, congratulations on that. And then an interesting race with Steve Harvey in California now. He's the famous Dodgers baseball player, is running to be senator against, oh my gosh, I'm brain dumping
Adam Schiff.
Yes. Oh, he's such a loser. And so the Dems are all in uproar. And then Katrina Pearson, that was Trump's communication director, ran for Congress in Texas. And she came out at 39%. And her competitor 39%, and then the other guy, there was a third that took a little bit of the voting away, and so she was ahead by like probably 300 votes at least. But I think Texas must be you got to have 50%, and they're going to have a runoff because there was no check mark. And I'm unimpressed with Texas. It's very hard to figure out who is winning damn races. I'm like,
I know,
it's like rough.
Well, I'm glad to see there was an effort in the Florida legislature. Somebody had floated some legislation to put Florida back to the 50% plus one primary win, and instead of the majority taking it, because we used to be 50% plus one, or you went to a runoff, and they changed that to just a plurality. So I'm glad to see that one was killed.
Well, there was definitely some interesting races around, and it was a lot going on. And
we had Christian Cinema. She's gone.
Yes, and so that has cleared the way for Carrie Lake for sure.
Yes, that was an absolute earthquake in the Arizona politics. That she and the thing about that the editorials were like, the one was like, does Christian Cinema's exit doom the Senate filibuster?
Oh my gosh!
Her and Manchin saved the filibuster. And it's like,
that's true. That's in our afterburner stack. Yeah.
And to me, it's kind of like, well, if the filibuster goes away, it goes away. Maybe it needs to go away because Donald Trump couldn't get things done because of the filibuster, and Mitch McConnell's going away, who's the champion of it. But the Democrats have this habit of shooting themselves in the foot. Harry Reid, went in there and did away with the filibuster, for federal judges except the Supreme Court. And McConnell warned him, this is nuclear war. And it's going to come back and bite you.
And define filibuster for our non-political friends, John.
Well, the filibuster means you have to have a majority, 60-person majority to get anything done in the Senate. It's not 50% or 50 plus one, with the vice president voting in a tie. It means you need 60 people. So 40 senators can get together and basically block any legislation. So that means the minority, and in this case, the Republicans, if the Republicans act as a uniform body, and we have 48, I believe, right now, I think it's 48, members, we can pretty much stop the Senate from doing anything, passing anything. The problem is when you get these left rhino, Republicans, the Mitt Romneys, the Susan Collins, the Barbara Murkowskis, the ones that are not, there are no principles to these people. They vote with the Democrats. That's how Chuck Schumer wins. He rounds up these clowns on a regular basis and gets them to vote with the Democrats, and then the real Republicans, like the Rick Scotts and Marco Rubios and Ted Cruz and Rand Paul, they're ineffective in stopping this legislation. So,
well, it's I think that her stepping away clears it for Carrie Lake. So I'm happy because we want Arizona, the future state I want to move to, if I could get my husband on board, to be Republican.
I think to get rid of that damn governor they got,
oh my gosh, yeah. But I want to go back to the State of the Union because Dean Phillips defends the Gold Star dad, Steve Nakui, after heckling Biden at the State of the Union. And So former Democrat presidential candidate Dean Phillips from Minnesota came to the defense of the father during his outbreak. And he goes, as a Gold Star son myself, I can only imagine the pain he's felt since losing his son in Afghanistan. No one should interrupt a State of the Union. But if Marjorie Taylor Greene wasn't arrested for her outburst, why should he? And Steve Nicoy is the father of the U.S. Marine who was killed at the botched withdrawal in 2021. And sadly, he was screaming Abbey Gate, and, how his son had never been recognized by Biden, and 13 people were killed and 170 civilians that day. And his son was Marine Lance Corporal Kareem Nicoy. And I guess what was sad is that his other son, committed suicide at the gravesite of his son. And so it was so crazy, he was arrested, and of course, we had all those protesters protesting against Gaza. That's why President Biden was 20 minutes late. Nothing happened to them.
Right. Nothing happens to them because, their protest is something that, they agree with. I don't think anybody that's in the people's house, whether they shout out or not, this is free speech. OK, bottom line, this is free speech. And how you can sit there and say you don't have the right to sit here and shout out in the people's house anything, whether you're protesting what's going on or not. I mean, fine, remove him if he's causing a disruption. I didn't have any problem with them removing him. Okay, that's okay. He had his say. Okay, take him out. He doesn't need to be arrested for
But when you read the stories,
or thrown in prison for any reason,
and Biden never contacted these families, it makes you ill because a president. Right. That when you read about presidents and secretary of defenses, the thing when troops are killed, that is the hardest thing they have to deal with, and they can't sleep at night and causes them nightmares, because they feel it. And this president is so drugged out and dementia out, he doesn't feel it, and yet
I don't think
that's why we need a leader.
He gives a rat's behind,
Well,
George Bush.
Uh-oh. All right, hold on. We just had a break here with my Skype. Stand by. All right, John's back. I don't know. The Chinese don't want me to have a show today, and they keep kicking me off Skype. You were in the middle talking about George Bush.
Well, I was talking about how George Bush visited every Gold Star family, and they didn't publicize it. They didn't make a big deal of it, because it was a personal visit. It had nothing to do with politics, and that's not Biden. Biden doesn't care about these people.
No.
And to me, the best description I've heard of Joe Biden is a kid sniffing, daughter showering, Chinese bribed.
Oh, well, you don't even want to read all of the or see all the memes on X. Now that I'm a checkmark girl, because they go after him.
Who he is, though. That's his history. That's who he is.
Well, and the other part of this at the State of the Union was Marjorie Taylor Greene she had her Make America Great hat, and she was in line as he was coming down. And I have a picture that I'll have to send you. It was some black woman that Biden actually gave a total mouth smooch, because my joke on Twitter was, who's Dr. Jill gonna kiss tonight? And it was him. And I was literally mortified. I rewound it because I couldn't believe they just lock lips. So I'll have to send you that picture because it was so funny. But she was wearing a shirt that, said say her name on it about Lakeland Riley. And she had a button, and she was wearing the Make America Great hat. And she tried to give Biden the button, but you couldn't see with the camera angles. And
she gave it to him.
Well, I know he held it up he held up a button.
On,
So but I couldn't see from the camera angles if that had happened, but he did have it. And then she screamed out, say her name, while he was discussing the border crisis. And of course, everybody was so angry about that. And then this morning,
even the left was angry because he said an illegal killed her, and the left is outraged that he used the word illegal.
Well, and then this morning the story's broken. I'm trying to pull it up here on my phone. because during the speech he finally tried to ad-lib it, and I'll have to find it in the speech. But this morning he said her name wrong. He called her Lincoln,
yeah,
and not Laken Riley. Which, granted, it's a hard name to say, but her mother.
But he had the button right in front of him with
I
her
know.
name on it.
Well, he's Dementia Joe, and this morning her mother's come out so angry that he couldn't even get her name right. And the parents were invited to the State of the Union, but they're still in mourning. I wouldn't have been able to make that at all. But yeah, let me pull up the speech here. What were your thoughts on that whole encounter?
Well, it's typical. The whole thing was, like I said, the Angry Joe show.
Yeah,
and it was political theater, and what Marjorie Taylor Greene did was fine with me. I think every Republican, how the Democrats show up in white. I think every Republican should have shown up in red, with a MAGA hat on, and that would have really been more appropriate for that setting. Although back to the Republicans trying to play nice. We try to play by the rules.
I'm tired of playing nice. I'm tired of playing nice. Because he opened the speech with Ukraine, and then it took over 40 minutes to get to the border issue, which is our number one problem.
Right. And so it's like it was not a State of the Union speech. It was a political. You don't start the State of the Union talking about Ukraine, okay?
No, you talk about America first, and it's never an America first administration ever. It's right. Not.
It's all about politics. And you could, and I'll give Speaker Johnson the credit for sitting back there and shaking.
He was
his
a
head
gentleman
during the lies. You could see him shaking his head back and forth. And I'm surprised some other Republicans didn't, particularly Matt Gaetz, shout liar.
I know. He was actually playing well because there was all the Second Amendment crap that was brought up too.
He actually played nice. I couldn't believe it. He left it to Marjorie Taylor Greene to be the vocal one.
And once again, it was like the same stuff over again. One of his lines, "I'm demanding a ban on assault weapons in high-capacity magazines. Pass universal background checks." I'm like, haven't we had this already?
Yes.
And then it was the medicine again. It's a 2,000 cap on prescription pills, and he's lowering the price of insulin. And I'm like, haven't we had this already? It was like at the recycled speech.
It's like the rich people, the rich people need to, millionaires and billionaires need to be paying their fair taxes. And I mean, I've been hearing this for 50 freaking years, Veronica. 50 years I've heard this from the Democrats. The rich need to pay their fair share. Well, then why do the Democrats keep writing all of these tax laws that give the rich all these benefits and exemptions?
Yeah, but rich people create jobs. You know what I'm saying? There's people in Amazon putting my Amazon purchases in a box that I need,
Right, but the fact is that they try to it's like grandma eating dog food, because Republicans are for grandma eating dog food. It's just this tired old rhetoric that's meaningless. If the Democrats are saying we want our primary money people, our primary donors, we want them to pay a whole lot more in taxes. No, they don't. They don't want them to pay more taxes. They want them to pay less taxes. They want to give more money to them so they can get their political kickbacks and money laundering operations. It's all about the grift in Washington. That's all it is. And this is all rhetoric for the idiots out in the country that are stupid enough, and believe me, there's 35% of the people that think Joe Biden's doing a good job. It's exactly for those 35% that are stupid, that actually believe this stuff, that the rich aren't paying their fair share.
I don't know which show I was watching, but they interviewed probably around New York. It was a bunch of black people, and they didn't want Biden because they're like, I have less money in my bank account, and then I have to decide against food or medicine, Yeah. So
I think that's what's got the Democrats really afraid is the fact that the blacks and Hispanics are
done.
There, are starting to peel off and saying, there's something wrong here. These leftists are not for me. They're for these street protesters that are out there causing, looting and all this stuff. They're causing the prices to go up. When you go buy a box of cereal and it costs you $11 for a box of effing cereal, or $5 for a dozen eggs, people get the message. I'm having to sit here and decide, I can't even afford to buy half a basket of groceries.
Well,
it cost me $200 when I go to the checkout.
I sent you this morning. It's a State of the Union speech with CNN fact checking and little blurbs, So I'm going, oh hell no, CNN wasn't the fact checker. This is stupid Biden people. But what was shocking, the other issue that was brought up was that he said Israel has a right to go after Hamas, and he was talking about how 30,000 Palestinians have been killed, but we've got it. He mentioned somewhere that he wanted to make it a two-state place again, and the shocking part was. He goes, I'm directing.
Neither side wants. Neither side wants it.
Well, and we know that two-state doesn't work anymore, so I'm past that at this point. But he said, I'm directing the U.S. military to lead an emergency mission to establish a temporary pier in the Mediterranean on the Gaza coast that can receive large shipments carrying food, water, medicine, and temporary shelters. But no U.S. boots will be on the ground. The temporary pier will enable a massive increase in the amount of humanitarian assistance getting into Gaza every day. And I'm like, okay, haven't they been shooting at us over in that region? Now we're going to be right there.
Well, that was the problem. And they still haven't fixed the problem. Okay, the problem was the aid trucks were coming over from Egypt, and they were being attacked. Okay, there was no. So here's the quote: "As we look to the future, the only real solution is a two-state solution." And then he goes, "I say this as a lifelong supporter of Israel and the only American president to visit Israel in wartime." I'm like, I'm ill over here. And he goes, "There's no other path that guarantees Israel's security and democracy." Oh, really? What was the path when they were right there and they walked over and slaughtered, raped, and beheaded babies? Yeah,
give me a freaking break.
The path for Israel is to eliminate Hamas and eliminate Hezbollah and eliminate Iran and Iraq as threats, and whoever else, the Houthis, pick whatever group you want, but just, I'll use the word exterminate, okay? Because that's what it's going to take. You can't, these people are crazy. They are flat crazy. And the only way, back to what purpose of war, kill people and break things, okay? You kill the enemy until the enemy yields. That's how you win a war. That's the only way you win a war.
I'm trying to find the Lakeland Riley statement in here, but I'm not finding it. So this must have been this was the pre-released State of the Union, John, because I'm not finding it in here. That's what I'm saying. It's all BS. We'll put out this for people that don't sit and watch it. Now they're going to read it. They're not even going to see the whole Lakeland Riley thing that went down. And then of course after the State of the Union, they dispatched Senator Katie Britt. So I guess she's the youngest senator. I think she's like 40.
She's a Republican senator from Alabama.
And so she spoke, and of course, it was kind of dramatic. It was a little overly dramatic. I don't know. It was very theatrical, but the words were great throughout the speech, and talked about all the hard issues and all the baloney that was in the speech before. So,
I'd had a thought, Veronica, that I thought the Republican response should have been delivered by Trump. That would have been the smartest freaking move.
Can you even imagine?
Trump deliver the response for the State of the. Could you imagine what would have happened if they'd let him do that?
Oh, especially if you didn't let the cat out of the bag. But the problem was Trump was on Truth Social. And so Trump has a Twitter X account with almost 90 million followers. And when he got disbanded from it, he didn't go back. And so it's there. And he started the Truth Social network. And on Truth Social, he has about 9 million. So it was caveated that he was going to do play-by-play of the State of the Union. So this was my problem. I'm tweeting, I'm watching, I'm taking notes, I'm on Truth Social, bam, bam, bam. He's, commenting brilliant comments, and then Truth Social crashed. True Social crashed. And I got insulted for the first time on X because people didn't like me. And one guy said he hated my hair. See, I'm like, whatever to live, they go after your looks, your outfit, my hair, my lips. I'm not Hispanic enough. I'm not a veteran enough. And this time it was my hair color. And I'm just going, oh my gosh. Okay, loser. But no, I've had a ton of traction on that tweet supporting that Steve Nakoy and his son. And let me look, because people are still like commenting, on it and liking it and sharing it. And I'm very happy since I've become a premium member, because I feel like I'm growing our brand, Veronica Live, getting it out there, and people are actually clicking and seeing what we're talking about. And it was the first time I've been very, very vocal. So I've been commenting on everybody's thing. So I've had this week 45,000 impressions. So that's amazing for me. It's a whole new level, and hundreds of people coming to see who I am. Who's this?
Well, I have
redhead?
So I don't. As usual, I don't really care. I'm just, social media to me is it's a.
But it's a way to grow the audience, and
I understand.
And I'm very excited because
from a commercial perspective, it's fine. From a personal perspective, I have no use for it.
Well, I just don't want people going after me on my looks. Go after me for what I'm saying, and our show.
Well, like I was saying, what Jason said, the academics, because they can't fight back with facts or debate with facts to counter your facts,
or how much money's in their bank account under Biden.
Right. They have, the only course they have is to attack you personally, over something that's irrelevant to the discussion at hand. Right.
My hair color.
Right.
It's so ridiculous.
It's just hateful. It just shows you.
Well, I just laugh, and then I got a bunch of FU, Trumper memes and stuff. So I just block those people because I really don't want to deal with people.
That's exactly what you should do, is block them, because they're useless human beings. They need to go back to their basement, and
then you go look at their profiles, and their hair's green, and they've got their nose ring, and
of course.
They're Satan worshipers, and I'm like, okay, this is your problem,
They're crazy people. That's the thing. They're crazy people with the platform, okay? And that's the problem with social media. Crazy people have access to the platform. There's no filter. There's no way to filter them.
Well, I highly recommend following Elon Musk, because the man has become a Republican overnight.
Yeah.
And, he's calling out, like, in the middle of the night, because I couldn't sleep last night. And so I, was on my new favorite platform. And he's calling out these Dems because it's baloney what they're doing. One of the stories.
Well, they're after him just as much. They're
attacking
his businesses. They're attacking Tesla. They're attacking SpaceX. I mean, it's just, they're attacking him personally. I mean, they're after him as much as they are after Trump, I think.
Well, one of the stories that was kind of interesting that I was reading last night was the Mitch McConnell's sister-in-law that died, that was at 50, that she was the CEO of a $1 billion company. The story on how she died came out. So she was in a Tesla on her property of one of her homes in Texas and had a party celebrating the Chinese New Year with her friends at the guest house. She got in her Tesla late at night and went to put it in gear to drive. It was literally a 10-minute walk, put it in the wrong gear. It went into the pond, and guess what? She couldn't open the doors or put the windows down. So she called her friends in the house, and it took 24 minutes for the cops to come, and they were afraid they were going to get electrocuted because of the battery, John.
Yep.
And they couldn't save her. They couldn't save her. Can you believe this?
Exactly, and it's back to the electric car thing. We saw the same thing down when the hurricane. The cars
catching on fire at the houses,
in the garage, and burned the house down.
Yeah,
it's back to these idiots in Washington. They don't ever look past first order, what's called first order effects. Okay, that there are second order and third order. It's like if you go out and you buy something, that the fact that you bought something meant somebody that made whatever it is that you have had a job, and they were able to go out and buy something else. That's a second order effect.
Oh, goodness. Here we go. We've been kicked off Skype. 1 second. Okay, I've got John back. Now it's the Russians kicking me off Skype. I can't even call you. I don't know what's going on. So, but we're talking about Angela Chow, I guess is her name.
Yeah.
But yeah, backed wrong direction, doing a 3-point turn, trying to get to her mansion a couple minutes away, and died tragically, and her friends couldn't save her. I mean, horrific death in the Tesla, trapped.
Well, it's not the first one. It's not the last one. Back to, Washington. People in Washington think they are smarter than we are, and that these electric cars and electric trucks, they're not ready for prime time. We don't have the infrastructure to run them yet. Those are second order effects, and the politicians don't care because that's not what makes the headline.
No,
they can't hardly give away electric cars right now.
Well, and it was a billionaire, and she's lost her life trying to be green. The other story I wanted to talk to you about in the stack of stuff is the ruling vacates Capitol rioters' sentences may impact January 6th cases. So I guess, and these are actually appointed. I heard, I was listening to the Ted Cruz show that I like, Verdict, and I guess these judges are Obama and I think Clinton appointees, but I guess they've realized that this stuff is wrong, what they're doing to these January 6ers that are, the key's been lost and we're never going to get them out of prison, and they're being convicted on the charge of, what is it?
Substantial interference with the administration of justice. Now there is an interesting charge that has, you read it and it's like, what the hell does that mean? And that's exactly what the appeals court said was, it's meaningless. What was going on in the Capitol has nothing to do, absolutely nothing to do with the administration of justice, which is a judicial process, not a congressional or legislative process. So trying to sit here and say that you're adding an enhancement that for interfering with judges.
Yes, and the vote and stuff. Yeah, it's
right. So they threw out this Air Force officers. They didn't throw it out. They
well, he's almost done. So December he's supposed to be released, but it's sounding like he should have been released like a long time, at least almost 9 months ago. So, the whole thing it's been abuse of power by the DOJ. Gross abuse to these people, and now you and I've read the book on what's happening in these prisons, and it's horrific.
Well, the state of the justice system in this country is absurd, and you relate that. There's another story in the stack about Alec Baldwin's.
I wanted to talk about that one with you. Yes,
she was found guilty of manslaughter, and it's like. And I'm reading this, and by the way, I actually watched a bunch of the testimony in
did you?
On TV. It was really interesting. So I ended up watching more than I kind of like was channel surfing and then found that. But listening to all this stuff, and the one that really got me was the first assistant director, a guy named David Halls. Now he was the one that was actually responsible for the guns, as far as real responsibility in the organization. It was his responsibility. He's the one that hired the armor. He's the one that told people where to be and when to be. And his job was to personally inspect that weapon.
Okay.
So when it armorer to first assistant to actor, that's supposed to be the process. And supposedly he actually handled the gun, but he didn't handle the gun. Well,
obviously he didn't look at it, and I had this discussion with my husband. We were talking about this story, and because he thinks Alec Baldwin should be at fault too. And I said, if I'm an actor on a set, I'm expecting you to hand me a gun with no bullets in it. Why were there any bullets in this gun? So this is a total cluster. Plus the girl was terrible at her job. Obviously she had drugs, because it talks about a small bag of cocaine. So should that person be anywhere near a gun? I think not.
Well, they pushed the whole cocaine thing aside as unsubstantiated, whatever, because there was nothing. That was not one of the charges, and it wasn't really. It was hearsay from what I heard from the woman that claimed that she handed her this bag. of white powder. So they haven't even established that it was a cocaine. Okay, so whatever you read whatever you want into that. But what fascinated me, the reason I kept watching was because they were actually talking about what was going on with the bullets, the blanks, the empty shells that looked, because when you look at a revolver, if you take a picture of a revolver close up, you can see like the ends where the primers are at. You can see the base of the bullet in the cylinder of the gun. So you have to have something in there to make it look realistic. And so they had different kinds of shells. Some of them were just empty shells. Some of them were actually blanks where they were actually shooting. When they pull the trigger, they want smoke and bang.
Yeah.
So they use blanks, and they know how to tell the difference, and that's why these people are all looking at this stuff. What never came out, what I still have not heard, is how did a real bullet get into that gun? Nobody has been able to say how or why.
Exactly, John. That's my thing. This was her job. Why were there any real bullets on this set at all? Unless you're the cop doing security on the set.
Right, but the issue was Alec Baldwin's production was running a loose ship, that she was not a full-time armorer. She had other tasks that she was assigned to do.
This is so stupid. Well, then he's going to be charged because.
So to me, it's like, so the first assistant, and he absolutely said, my job is to inspect that weapon before it's handed to the actor every time. Well, he didn't do it this time. So it's like, okay, but what really pissed me off was he pleaded guilty, okay, to a charge, and he got probation. Now I'm like, wait a minute, how can you plead guilty to this, being responsible for killing a person and injuring another one, and you get probation, and then you want the armorer to sit here and go to prison for 18 years or up to, they haven't sentenced her yet. But
well, yeah, I saw up to 18, years. But I do find her responsible. But if he had that title too, then he's partially responsible.
They're all responsible. They're all responsible equally.
I mean,
every one
so
of them.
Careless with weapons. Why was there a bullet on the set? There should be all fake bullets, but we know people have died from the blanks. There was that famous actor. I looked it up the other day.
Right.
He was this gorgeous actor that put it up by his head, goofing around, and the blank killed him. So you have to take it seriously no matter what.
A blank bullet makes a bang, but it has wadding. It has something that keeps the powder around the primer, so that when it goes off, that wadding can kill you just as much as a bullet.
I remembered that case when this happened, and then I'm like, how the hell did a real bullet even get remotely close to that?
But I'm, like I said, the part that shocks me is how one guy can walk, and how somebody else is liable for 18 years, and then Alec Baldwin is going to get off scot-free because he's famous and
but I think he's paid the family. I think he's paid them like $20 million, so they're happy to move on. I think at this point, I mean, the whole thing's a mess, of course.
I know, but it's not the money; it's the responsibility, and it's like, uneven. It's the uneven application of justice here, and that's the part that I'm having a problem with. If he gets probation for his negligence, then maybe she ought to get probation. They haven't had to sentence.
Well, I think she was definitely careless, and it sounded like she was a twit for sure.
Went to jail. Right.
Yeah.
They all should go to jail for 6 months. Okay.
Well,
it's not like they intentionally murdered these people. I will.
Well,
say that.
I do blame it on that woman, and Alec Baldwin obviously is at fault too. But it was definitely that woman's job to oversee it.
Right, but it was all three of them were responsible.
Yeah.
And equally responsible, and there was a failure, and you ought to pay for it.
Well,
financially and in prison time, but that's just my moral yardstick.
Well, on a quick story I just want to hit that was breaking yesterday, Rona McDaniel out. The new guy is Michael Whatley, who's coming in as the chair, and then Laura Trump is the co-chair.
Co-chair, yeah.
So, and I've always felt like on Twitter, people are like, why Laura Trump? I go, she's been on TV nonstop for 7 or 8 years now.
And she's very articulate as far as...
She's perfect, and I don't care if she has a Trump last name. She's actually been fighting the fight, unlike stupid Ronna McDaniels. And then they're like, who's Michael Whatley? Because I was like, who's Michael Whatley? And he's a North Carolina native. He's served as chairman of the North Carolina GOP since 2019. He's also served as the RNC's general counsel since last year. He has decades of experience in GOP politics. He previously served as a senior official in the George W. Bush administration as chief of staff to former U.S. Senator Elizabeth Dole, who we all loved, and a senior advisor to the Bush, Cheney, and Trump-Pence campaigns. And he was a Trump ally who has publicly endorsed the former president's false claims that the 2020 election was stolen. And he has his own radio show. Oh, well, maybe there's an opening for us in North Carolina now.
The false claims is an editorial by the leftist. Okay, that's not. No,
I know. Sorry, I should caveat, but this is a Yahoo story. But yeah. So Lord Trump.
I think the election was stolen too.
Yeah. Well, Laura Trump has been actively campaigning for her father-in-law since 2016, and she's been a Fox News paid correspondent for a while too. So I'm very pleased because I think she's going to kick ass. I don't know this other guy, but obviously he's a lawyer. He knows how to talk, and he'll get it done.
Well, Peter, when we talked to Peter Feynman, the national committee man here for state of Florida, Peter was very, very much in favor of this guy and said he's a good guy and we'll do a really good job. So
I'm excited. So
yes, gone,
and I will reach out to Peter. I was texting him yesterday, anyways, because I'm trying to find somebody to do a debate, and so I looked to him for some guidance. And so, anyways, we'll get him on to see.
That this week
what went down with Houston.
This week was like a political earthquake almost. I mean, it started out with the Supreme Court and Trump, 9-0.
Oh,
okay.
Yes.
That Trump cannot be removed by the states from any state ballot. Okay. 9-0. Okay. There was some disagreement over whether it went far enough or not, but all 9 justices concurred, and to me that was very important. Okay.
Well, and my tweet on that one was I was so proud that all the Supreme Court justices had their energy drink that morning to vote 9-0.
Yeah, well,
because that was shocking.
Well, the thing is, you can't. Of course, the left comes out and says, "Oh, it's all the court's politicized." It's all Republicans and all this stuff. No, it was 9-0. Included the 4 leftists, on the court there, and I was fine with that. And then they decided to go ahead and accept the Trump immunity claim.
Yeah, so that'll be the next one.
Yeah, where the D.C. Circuit Court just absolutely. I mean, you talk about a travesty of justice. First off, they told Trump he couldn't have presidential immunity, that wasn't such a thing. They told him that he couldn't. This is a 3-judge panel. Okay, there's 9. There's a full court. Normally 3 judges hear it, and then you can go what's called an en banc request if you don't like the 3-judge and get the full court to hear it. Well, they told him you can't do that. You have no right to do that. No, by the way, you have a week to file with the Supreme Court, which they can't do either. So they went ahead and filed with the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, "We will take this and look at this." And so that was a huge case because Jack Smith, the federal prosecutor that's after him for the documents, the classified documents case, the insurrection case, is where this is going to have a big impact.
What about this when it comes to the Supreme Court too? In the State of the Union, Biden was like schooling them on.
Right.
And so I'm trying to find it in the speech here. Of course, I think this speech has been cleared of all of the craziness that went on.
Yeah.
But here we go. Okay. Many of you in this chamber and my predecessor are promising to pass a national ban on reproductive freedom. My God, what freedoms will you take away next? In its decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, the Supreme Court majority wrote, "Women are not without electoral or political power." And then he's like, no kidding. Clearly, those bragging over Roe v. Wade have no clue about the power of women. They found out, though, when reproductive freedom was on the ballot and won, he said, in 2022, 23, and they'll find out again in 2024. And so he kind of looked at the Supreme Court and was like, you guys didn't do your job. And I'm not seeing it in this speech, but people were pissed. And and I guess Clarence Thomas doesn't come anymore because he's like, I'm out.
Right. Well, they're trying to attack. First off, there's a political motive. They're trying to get rid of Clarence Thomas while Biden is still president, so that they can appoint another radical leftist. Okay, and they have control of the Senate. So if a Supreme Court justice goes away, we're going to get a radical leftist. Okay, that's just the way it is. But the other thing is, we had Mitch McConnell stepping back saying I'm not running for leadership anymore.
Oh, that's right.
And now God, there's just
and it wasn't Hunter was around too, and that's kind of been hidden all the crap that Hunter Biden's been doing, which we know he definitely got money from China. Yeah,
his testimony in the House committee and stuff was, I mean, there was just so much going on. And it's interesting that story basically got buried because of everything else that was going on.
Oh, how convenient. And I thought it got buried because of Mitch McConnell saying he's stepping back, but of course he's not stepping back until November.
Right.
Give me a break.
Back to this is all politics. Why was the timing done like that?
And
what was the purpose?
I think to have another story and hide Hunter Biden. And then RFK Jr. came out in support of Rand Paul as the next Mitch McConnell. So that's all over Twitter. But I do isn't this cute? You have the political cartoons of the week, and he put one in for me.
Yep,
and it has because my all-time favorite concert now is the U2 in Vegas in the $2 billion sphere. And so it's got the sphere, and on it, because you can project anything you want, it says live final concert live, U2 at the sphere. Okay, yay!
All right, another one
in the books. Okay.